the Pioneer Ringers. How are you? I hope you're healthy and well. As the Pioneer family, we continue to follow the Russia-Ukraine war together. According to the latest reports, the focal areas of the fight between the Ukrainian army and the Russian army are similar to the last month or so. While the Ukrainian army is trying to advance on the Kherson front line, the Russian army is trying to advance on the Donetsk front line. The problems of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Bakhmut front line are also growing. On the Donetsk front line, there is a really tremendous defense of the Ukrainian armed forces. The attacks of the Russian army are really quite furious. Therefore, the Ukrainian army has shifted many of its units to the vicinity of the Donetsk front line. As you can imagine, this has a negative impact on the Ukrainian troops on the other front lines. So what is the latest situation on the front line? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue our work to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. There is also a big team behind this work. If you want to support this team, you can use the super thanks button below the video. Let's start if you're ready, the Pioneer reports. Let's start with the latest developments on the Kherson front line. First, let's see the Kherson region on the map. That's it. Marines of the Ukrainian armed forces continue their operations on the Kherson front line in the direction of Krinky. According to the latest reports, Ukrainian Marines managed to gain new positions in the area southwest of the village. According to the reports, during the day, this area was intensively shelled by the artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces. Considering the successes of the Ukrainian Marines' attacks, we can say that these artillery attacks were effective. Now I would like to include a few statements from Russian sources here. As you know, Russian sources constantly claim that this region should be reinforced. However, there is such a situation. If the Russian army does not need a fire support, why did the attacks of the Ukrainian armed forces, which started suddenly, began to succeed quite quickly? At this point, some Russian sources have remarkable claims. According to the claims, the Russian army is sufficient in every respect. There is no deficiency in the terms of firepower, equipment, or reinforcement routes in the Russian army. However, according to these sources, the problem of the Russian army is disorganization. In the reports they share, these sources drew attention to the lack of coordinations in the Russian army. So which conclusion does this lead us to? Of course, it shows that inadequacies of the commanders appointed by the Russian armed forces to the region have started to come to the fore again. We should also infer the following from these reports. As you know, there are some major problems within the Russian army. Chief among these problems is the lack of firepower and command and competence. In addition, polarizations within the Russian army is another problem about the Russian army. These differences of the opinion among Russian sources show that polarizations is no longer limited to the Russian army, but polarizations and differences of the opinion have begun among the Russian sources. Let us continue by monitoring the artillery activity in the region. According to the recent reports, Russian artillery units targeted Ukrainian positions in Novotangivka, Tangivka, and Lviv. In turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted positions of the Russian armed forces in Skadovska, Olopristan, Krashevka, Alyoshki, Poima, Pechenivka, Podestepnoe, Kazakams, Krosunka, and Novaya Kakhovka. Now let's continue by analyzing the latest developments on the Zaporizhia front line. In the past days, we have mentioned that there has been calm in the region for quite a long time. We also stated that there was a possibility that this calm could be broken. And this calm has officially broken. Ukrainian armed forces have again launched an attacks in the Robotny section of the Zaporizhia front line. Ukrainian troops have moved to advance west of Robotny. According to the latest reports, artillery supports of the Ukrainian armed forces launched an attack on the Russian positions in the western part of the Robotny. Following these attacks, Ukrainian infantry units also mobilized and targeted Russian positions. It is possible to speak of limited progress for the time being. A similar situation is observed in the direction of Verbov. According to the latest reports, Ukrainian artillery units targeted Russian positions in the vicinity of Verbov, just as they did west of Robotny. Here again, we see Ukrainian infantry units carrying out attacks. However, we don't observe any border changes between the two armies during the clashes in the direction of Verbov. Let us continue with the artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, Russian artillery units targeted positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in Plavny, Stepkorskoy, Kamenskoye, Petyahatki, Malaya Sherbaki, Robotnyu, and Malaya Tokmakcha. In turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted positions of the Russian armed forces in Zherbyanki, Konvalov, Nestoryanka, and Novoprokopivka and Novofedoryovka. Let's continue with the latest developments on the Donetsk front line. As you know, the Russian armed forces have been under pressure here for some time. This pressure has still not been broken. According to the latest reports, after intensive shelling, the Russian army continued offensive operations in Marinka near Permovskoye, Severnoye in the industrial zone southeast of Avdiivka and towards Novokaliinov. In the Pervomoskoye direction, the Russian troops made some limited gains. As we have mentioned, the presence of the intense pressure here is straining the Ukrainian army. Therefore, according to the reports of local sources, the Ukrainian army has transferred some of its units from positions north of the Bakhmut front line. Therefore, we observe that in the northern part of the Bakhmut front line, the Ukrainian army is experiencing a loss of strength. The Ukrainian army is really fighting hard to stop the Russian offensive on the Donetsk front line and to prevent its advances. We believe that this struggle deserves more support. Let us also mention the artillery activities in the region. According to the latest reports, Russian artillery units targeted positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in Novomikhailivka, Pobeda, Krasnogorovka, Chernikovy, Orlakovka, Kamrinka, and New York. The artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces responded by shelling the positions of the Russian armed forces in Alexandrovka, Staromikhailivka, Donetsk, Opitny, and the village of Krasnogorovka and Horlivka. What do you think? Do you think the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Kherson front line will continue? What do you think about the disagreements of the Russian sources about the latest situation in the region? Do you think the Ukrainian army will be able to gain new positions on the Zaporizhia front line? Will they be able to break the pressure of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Donetsk front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.